what you're seeing is that PSM dashboard. And this is actually, as you can see, this is a piece that comes along with AMD Pensando. This VM is available through the Aruba support portal. When you utilize the CX10Ks, you would download it. Comes as it runs as a VM. Like I said, you can run it in 3 VMs into a cluster. We do provide clean installs. We have OVAs, QCals, and there is an upgrade file as well. So if you install it and you need to upgrade to the next version, it's not a full install, right? You can step up from where you're at to the next install. So, and if you're familiar with firewall management, we've taken that same type of approach, right? We wanted to provide an interface that if you needed to use it to manage the devices, absolutely you could. It was clean, it was concise, not a whole lot of just fluff into it. So you'll see that we've really tried to keep it manageable, and also we've built in some of the capabilities, like I was mentioning, that if you're using other tools today to manage these configurations, these types of configurations, Ansible, some Python, maybe some sort of SOAR tool, or if you are using Aruba Fabric Composer, it's really easy to integrate this management into that control plane. So I'll step through some of these real quick. You can look at the system. I actually just have a one VM running here in the cluster information. So you can see that I just have one. You can run it as 1 or 3. And most times in small, lab environments, proof of concepts, things like that, we'll just run it in 1 unless we need to test failover. You can also see the switches that are managed. This is an environment that we use commonly up and down for access. So we have switches that come in and out of here. Today, there's no switches in it, but I like it because we're actually able to make changes if necessary into this environment. It's not a static lab. And then we close this out. I'm going to scoot down to the bottom here because I want to save some of the actual management of the configuration of the policies towards the end. But you can see here, very standard, what you would see for enterprise firewall management, right? You have the ability to do snapshots. You can upload your own certificates in there if you need to do that into your environment. You can generate tech support files. We have the ability to do user management along with role-based access control in here. You can build these custom roles. If you had a security group, or if you had even like a help desk, right? And they only needed to log in, maybe you wanted them to view the configurations or part of the configuration, but not be able to actually change it. You would just create the roles. You could assign the users to the roles, and then that would be what they would see and what they would access in the platform. We have different types of authentication. You can test against LDAP, RADIUS, pretty standard things there. One of the neat things that they built in here too, and goes back to the automation piece, is this API capture. So we do have a Postman collection that we will publish. We post some things like a Swagger collection as well, standards there. But if you're looking at the device and you're troubleshooting, or maybe you're building some of the calls for some scripts that you're writing, and you wanted to know what those calls were, you can actually do what we call a live capture. So if I turn this on, you see that this pops up here. And then as I start to click around into the UI, right, what I should see here is I should see those API commands be generated as well. So I can enable live capture. I can go to the user interface and actually do what it is that I want to do, and come back here, and I can get the actual API command and the syntax that I want to do. If I wanted to say put that into a script, or if I wanted to write that into an API call. All right. So getting into the meat of this here, we have this idea of what we call tenant. So today, when you look at Policy and Services Manager, multi-tenancy is something that is being developed. It's actually going to be delivered on the next release, which is coming soon. But this idea of tenant is that the same word that we talked about with Fabric. It's the collection of devices that are being managed with the same configuration. So in here, I would see all the tenant information. I could see all my VRFs, all my information, all my layer 2, layer 3 information here. You come here, I see all the VRFs that are created in this environment. and I can see the networks that go along with that. The network certainly is just the layer 2 information. And this is important, right? This is typically, unless you're running some sort of layer 2 firewall, this is important information for us, because this is how you actually start to do the types of segmentation and the types of security filtering that you're looking for when you start to implement these distributed services. So we're actually able to take this information, and as you create it in PSM, there's a process that updates the each CX10000 switch and lets it know that, okay, when I see traffic that comes in with this particular tag, the first action is to redirect that so that I can actually do my services and inspection. And that's the mechanism. So if you're familiar with any type of service direction or service insertion, it's typically, you're taking the packet, maybe you reroute it outside of the box. This happens all inside the switch. There's nothing for you to manage. So in this case right here, if I wanted to do inspection or a policy enforcement, or if I wanted to do gain visibility into VLAN 203, by creating this and pushing this down to the switch, that's the only operation and the only configuration that I have to do in order to have that traffic adhere to a policy that I have set up for it. And it goes anywhere VLAN 203 shows up in the network. It'll go to any of the racks, potentially multi-data center, wherever you're managing these switches. That's the only configuration you make, right? You tell it what you need to inspect. And if for some instance, I said I no longer wanted to do that, or it was not one that I wanted to inspect anymore, or I was changing it, when I remove that configuration, that action happens in reverse. It actually does not get inspected anymore. It gets switched and routed just like regular traffic. It doesn't actually go up for redirection, service insertion. So that is about as clean as you're gonna see. Introducing these distributed services into an environment. There's no redirecting outside of the box. There's no taking hairpinning it up to another device so that you can actually provide some sort of firewalling inspection, which is a common practice today. It all happens inside each individual device, and that's that distributed architecture that I was referencing earlier. All right, so we have this networking information, and we have the VRFs in here. And certainly, if you're familiar with networking, VRF is a collection of networks. I can actually apply policy, as we'll see, in different levels. So if I get in here to the security policies, this is the rules, right? This is what you want to have happen on your network, what you want to allow, what you do not want to allow. So if I come in here and I create a policy, and I'll click on this one here. So I named this policy, it's called protect DB, and then I've added these rules to it. And I've put this information in, and these are the rules that if traffic matching this VRF that's inside this VRF right here, if the networks and traffic inside this VRF hit this policy, these are the rules that they're going to adhere to. I can allow it, deny it, right? Very standard firewalling rules. I will say some of the things that are of note coming up. We're working on doing some, the ability to dynamically create these source and destination addresses, right? So you think about if you're running a virtual environment, right? Maybe a VMware environment, and you're creating tags, or you're creating some sort of labels in that environment that your server administrators are using as they bring VMs up and they bring VMs down, right? In this environment, it's very dynamic. So what would be really nice is when you take those tags and those labels that are already being used, and you can apply them to the physical architecture as well. So we'll be able to take that and then query vCenter, in this case, query vCenter, and say, okay, tell me everything that is part of this tag, and then we'll take that information and we'll put it into the policy. And then as that tag and as the membership changes, that would change dynamically in this rule set as well. So it's the merging between the physical security architecture and the virtual security architecture, right? You wouldn't have to go, this wouldn't be two separate actions anymore. It would just be the one action based on what you created. So pretty straightforward. Like I said, when you hear the full policy, usually when Dan gives the presentation, he talks about this. Why do customers want to move to this type of architecture, and why is this important? Because you look at it, and there's a couple of main reasons that really differentiate what we're able to do just today, and not even thinking about the enhancements that are coming along. Number one, statement or the fabric becomes stateful, right? So when we redirect this traffic up there, we actually do initiator and responder flows. So if you send traffic up through this distributed services, we're actually going to create a reverse flow and expect the traffic that what it looks like when it comes back. And if it doesn't look like that, then it's not going to return, right? Very different than from a stateless type of architecture where packets are just switched or routed just based on some of the header information. So we're bringing in some stateful connection tracking there. Number two, scale. For customers that are already looking to go in this direction, one of the more common architectures only has a really limited TCAM buffer size, and it really starts to max out around the 8,000 kind of enforcement line. Maybe call them ACLs. They are stateless, so we'll just call them ACLs. It really starts to really max out the management space around 8,000 ACLs. We've been, because of the architecture and because of the way that we've developed this, we're scaling now in this environment right here. If you had to build, say, up to 1 million of these rules, you could do that on this environment with limited impact to the throughput, to the hardware, to the time that it takes packets to traverse that module. So just on scale alone, and just on bringing it to like a stateful environment, those are two huge security-minded enhancements that we're seeing customers really ask about and really look forward to. So there's a couple options when we export the traffic out as well. We use, like I mentioned, we use open standards. So there's NetFlow traffic that comes out, there's syslog traffic that comes out. We've introduced the ability to also do per flow IP fix. So we have a template, an IP fix template, and every flow that we see coming through the network, we populate the template and send out a log to, there's whichever tools can actually process it, right? There's a number of tools that can. IPFix is an open standard, so it's growing. But if you're familiar with IPFix, you'll also know that the templates are unique to the product, right? There's IE fields that each product can validate and that may be unique to them. We actually have 2 that are unique to us, so we can send that out. We can build those templates out to the SIEM tools. They can integrate with, Splunk or Elk or whoever you have running ArcSite. Very flexible. A very good focus, I would say probably like a high focus just on open standards, right? We don't want to build anything that's proprietary that you can't use to integrate with the environment that you're already running. And I have a couple of profiles here you can see, right? If maybe I wanted to send only denied logs and I want to send them to this destination over here, because there's a group of folks that are really interested in that. They're not concerned with what was allowed. Or if I want to send all my logs to a SIEM, I can do that as well. Again, pretty standard. We tried to keep it slim. It's enterprise firewall management, but we're very focused on what it is that we're providing policy around. We're not trying to add too much overhead to it as well. If you're logging back to PSM, you can actually analyze the logs here. You saw that there was no switches connected to this. So I don't have any logs to analyze on this particular environment here. But if I wanted to, I could come in here and I could analyze the logs. I could start seeing who was talking to who in my environment. I can also build policy based off of what I see here. And that's really a good way for smaller environments as they're starting up, you can start to see that traffic. One of the things that we find commonly is that customers don't have visibility into the conversation that are happening at the switch port level. So a lot of the logs that we're generating is new data, new information to them. It's not something that they already have a policy where we just transform it into this. We're generating new data, new capabilities. Right? So we can do if you're looking at say inter VLAN type traffic, if you're not doing that today, we're even down to micro-segmentation options where you're doing intra VLAN. If you have private VLANs running and you have multiple guests that run on a host and you're doing inspection between the two, if you don't see that traffic today, then it's really hard to determine what that policy looks like. You can start to gather the logs, start to analyze the logs, and use that to build policy as well as you get going.